Now to the latest in the conflict in the Middle East. Israel is expanding its ground offensive into Gaza in order to root out Hamas fighters, as President Benjamin Netanyahu said that Israel will not agree to a ceasefire, adding that this is the time for war.
Humanitarian agencies say that aid trucks are being delayed into Gaza and hospitals are literally overflowing with wounded civilians and displaced people. But there was some good news overnight as Israeli teenage hostage Ori Megadish was rescued from Hamas by the IDF. And gladly, we can tell she was reunited with her family. Let's now speak to Eylon Levy. He's a spokesperson for the Israeli government. Eylon, thank you so much indeed for joining us. First of all, actually, before we talk about the ground offensive, your response, my friend, to that news overnight of that hostage being released by the IDF from Hamas.
Finally, a glimmer of good news that IDF forces inside Gaza were able to rescue one of our hostages, one of around 240 hostages, which I'll remind you include 33 children under the age of 18, 10 toddlers under the age of 5, some brutally ripped out of the arms of the parents who were murdered right in front of them and are now being held by terrorists with black balaclavas and Kalashnikov rifles in a dark tunnel somewhere in Gaza. So we're pushing ahead. We're doing everything we can to rescue those hostages. Clearly standing by and asking Hamas nicely to give them back was never going to work. And we're hopeful. We understand that our ground offensive right now is creating the conditions to advance our two goals in this war that Hamas dragged us into, to defeat the terror organization that perpetrated October 7th and to bring back our stolen children, our stolen friends, all those people who were so brutally abducted during the massacre of October 7th.
And Eylon, speaking about that ground invasion, how confident are you that Israel can actually eradicate Hamas? What's the end game here? What does the end of Hamas look like for your government?
Israel is going to topple Hamas and dismantle its military and terrorist infrastructure. And I'll tell you why. Because there's a realization in Israeli society, from the left to the right, that we can simply no longer exist next to a jihadi enclave on our borders that can send death squads at will to behead people, to burn whole families alive, to rape little girls, to torture and mutilate children, to commit the unspeakable atrocities they did on October 7th. Really, Israeli society is united around the understanding that we simply cannot exist with Hamas controlling the Gaza Strip and continuing to use it as a base for attacks against us. So we're going to go after the whole of Hamas inside the Gaza Strip. The days ahead are going to be long. They're going to be difficult. We have no illusions about the evil enemy that we are up against. But after many years, perhaps too many years of trying to put the issue to one side, putting off a ground offensive because we know how dangerous it would be, everyone in Israel understands now we have no choice. Hamas forced us into this awful war with October 7th. They started this war, and we're going to win this war.
And Eylon, what about the presence of Hamas outside of Gaza? What do you say about the backing that they appear to have from the likes of Qatar and Iran? How can you truly know that Hamas presence outside of Gaza will be eradicated?
Hamas is not alone. Hamas is part of a regional axis of terror that takes in Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, Iran. All of them have been trying to escalate the situation over recent weeks. Well, we've been focusing on the situation in the south, and our goal is the total defeat of Hamas in the Gaza Strip in response to October 7th and the 8,000 rockets that we've had on us. You just had the weather forecast talking about the storm in the UK. We've had 8,000 rockets raining on us in recent days. And in the north, deterrence, trying to stop Hezbollah and Hamas's allies from dragging us into another war in the north. We know they're trying to escalate this. We know that their end goal is the murder of all the Jews and the destruction of the state of Israel. But at the moment, we're focusing on trying to defeat Hamas and deter Hezbollah so that this conflict doesn't escalate any more widely.
Eylon, final question from me. I'd love your response. We've been absolutely unequivocal in our support for what Israel has to do in terms of what happened 3 weeks ago. And I think really we need to keep reminding ourselves there are war crimes. Some of what went on is beyond ISIS-like, and this terrorist genocidal unit needs to be taken out. I don't think anybody has any doubt. I like Nicola's question, what does it look like? There's no doubt that the ground offensive, I'm sure it's carefully thought out, but we hear about this labyrinth of tunnels underneath Gaza. We've heard about how difficult this is going to be. We've heard about the funding and all of that. As this intensifies, and I know war is horrible and dirty, and I completely stand by that comment, the world is looking at what's going on in Gaza. Naturally, the world will, be it MPs here or public opinion, and they will go, yes, what happened is awful, but how does this finish? I just would like your response to not justification, because you've all the justification in the world, but what you would say to the people who say, if you're trapped in Gaza, there's no chance. What would you say to those people?
We would say that Hamas beheaded babies and burned whole families alive so that the only thing the forensic pathologists found is 2 intertwined, burned spines. There is no but after that. Hamas revealed itself to be the face of pure, sheer, unadulterated evil, and I'm quoting the President of the United States.
Yeah.
And evil must be wiped out. That's why Prime Minister Sunak said the UK wants Israel to win. President Biden said the US will make sure Israel has everything it needs to win. And President Macron urged us to fight terror without mercy. Now, the fact that Hamas is using civilians in the Gaza Strip as human shields is outrageous. Hamas has placed its main operational command center underneath the Shifa hospital in Gaza, which is a clear war crime, because they know that Israel doesn't want to hurt civilians and that Israel is urging civilians to get out of harm's way. And by the way, most of them have. Most of the people in northern Gaza have heeded Israel's warning and moved to the south where it will be safer for them. But we are going after Hamas. We will not go back to 6 o'clock on the morning on October 7th. We will not go back to a world in which a genocidal terror organization that threatens to murder all the Jews has an ability to do so. There will be no ceasefire, because a ceasefire is calling on Israel to surrender. A ceasefire calls on Israel to stop defending itself. A ceasefire tells Hamas that it can get away with it, that it's free to do it again, and it's free to do it again knowing the international community will stop Israel defending its people from these savages. That won't happen. Hamas forced us into this war, and we're going to win this war by dismantling the terror organization that perpetrated October 7th, the worst terror attack in world history in absolute terms after 9/11.
Eylon, thank you. Really, I understand completely the passion, and I understand entirely where you're coming from. Thank you very, very much indeed for joining us on Talk Today this morning.